Hello everyone, my name is Adelanda and this is Solarpunking, where we discuss solarpunk ideology, things we can do in our communities to make them better, and ways to build a world that we want to live in. We are back, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who stuck around, and to my surprise, I want to thank everyone who joined this winter. I didn't think it was possible to gain subscribers while the show was on hiatus, but we did, and this community is continuing to grow, and I have all of you to thank for it. Today I want to talk about culture, and specifically Black History Month, and I know, it's technically over, but as many of you know, I celebrate Black history all year long. And I think it's solarpunk to immerse yourself not only in your own culture, but as a respectful, welcomed guest into other cultures. And this is the weird thing about nationalism, right? Especially white nationalism in America specifically. There are people who look at the rich tapestry of cultures in this country, and for some reason they see a threat. But personally, I'm someone who will, if I see a random festival happening in town, I'll pull over and park and join to see what's up. I once stumbled upon the Cinco de Mayo festival while doing my laundry in town, and funnily enough, I also found a jazz festival and mingled with the crowd of jazz heads that way as well. I'm not someone who is very tribal. I'm a registered independent, and I don't really watch sports, so I'm not someone who struggled with belonging. I think the variety of cultures that we get to experience here in America is one of the few amazing benefits to living in this country, and it blows my mind that some folks wholeheartedly reject that experience. But first of all, let's define culture. It might mean different things to different people, so what is it and why does it matter? Culture is a dynamic and socially constructed system of shared meanings, practices, knowledge, beliefs, values, and ways of being that are produced, reproduced, and transformed through people's everyday interactions. Culture actively shapes social relations, power structures, histories of oppression and resistance, and the lived experience of communities while also being shaped by them. Culture also builds resilience and is nurtured within communities that are often marginalized by dominant institutions. Here's a clip from PBS Origins where Danielle Bainbridge does an amazing job of explaining the concept of culture.
What is culture? Well, as a cultural historian myself, I'm going to tip my hat to 20th century theorist Raymond Williams' 1976 definition of culture. According to Williams, our modern use of culture exists largely under three main umbrellas. First, there are the intellectual and spiritual and aesthetic development realms of culture that encompass shared ideologies and beliefs. This is probably the least tangible portion of culture. Two good examples are the concept of a shared faith or patriotism. Both have a fixed set of values and ideas attached to them and can inspire cultural production, but they are also ideologies that exist even if they aren't being actively enacted. So you can feel patriotism even when you're not actively performing a ritual that displays it. Just like you can experience shared faith even when you're not engaging in religious ceremonies. Then there's a portion of culture that covers the shared way of life of a defined group of people, meaning the way that a fixed group interacts and lives in accordance with their common ideologies. This can be very specific, like the shared lifestyle of one finite group of people, or extremely expansive, like a shared reality that extends between all of humanity. So as far as we know, all humans share the earth. All humans, in order to survive, must eat. But the way we live on Earth, whether in a large city or in a rural community, is defined by the people we are directly engaging with on a daily basis. And the third and final category of culture that Williams describes, and the one we'll talk about the most today, is related to shared creative and artistic productivity. This includes the art, literature, music, films, songs, and general representation of a given culture or group of people. Cultural production is the most concrete portion of culture because because it gives us objects, and often physical items to look at and engage with. So although this all may seem a bit dense, it's helpful to think about culture like a series of concentric circles radiating outward from the center, and you're the center. In the first circle are the things closest to us, like ideologies, because they exist largely in our minds. Then we have shared ways of life, or things that we engage in with people directly around us. And in the farthest circle is cultural production, or the objects, artworks, and creations that express our culture and that we shuttle out into the world. And being farthest away from the center, that's also the sphere most prone to traveling far away from its original context and therefore being taken up elsewhere.
So shortly put, culture shapes how you interact with your community and your broader environment. It's also deeply tied to our sense of personal identity. I came across this short YouTube video from creator Rich Perspectives, where he introduces the question, where are you from, and how it ties to personal identity and culture. I'm going to share a bit of it here, but I highly recommend checking out the entire video.
Where are you from? A seemingly straightforward question, but one that carries the weight of centuries of human history, echoing with the whispers of ancestors and the footprints they left behind. For many, the answer is simple, connected to a single place on the map and a lineage traced through generations. But for others, it is more elusive, a dance between multiple worlds. In a world shaped by borders and boundaries, we are defined by the lands we inhabit, the cultures we inherit, and the stories we carry within us. But beneath the surface is a tapestry woven from threads of countless narratives, each thread a testament to the complexity of human identity.
I was privileged enough to receive a great education as a child, and so I've always been very proud and knowledgeable of my heritage. I know that's not the norm for everyone, though, and that cultural history has largely been marginalized in the American education system. This is why I wish more people were as excited about Black History Month as I am, and as other Black people are. I also wish more people were curious and adventurous enough to want to explore other cultures. I believe that this is how you build a shared experience among the people, and how we solidify the ideological reality that we need each other. But I also want to highlight that I said, immerse yourself as a respectful, welcomed guest to other people's cultures. Because as a Black American, I've also experienced the distorted, consumptive appropriation of my culture, and I want to be clear that I'm not inviting that upon my people. For example, one of my biggest pet peeves is when non-Black people use ebonics or slang specific to my people and then mock it or dismiss it as Gen Alpha speak. That is wildly harmful and disrespectful. Also, I'm not a fan of K-pop, but I digress. What I'm describing here is cultural appropriation. So let's define it so that we're all on the same page. Cultural appropriation refers to the adoption, use, or borrowing of cultural elements such as symbols, practices, dress, language, art, or knowledge from one cultural group by members of a more dominant or privileged group in ways that are unacknowledged, disrespectful, exploitative, or divorced from their original meaning and context. This process often reinforces unequal power relations, commodifies or trivializes cultural expressions, and can contribute to erasure, stereotyping, and material and symbolic harm to the originating community. Let's return to that PBS Origins clip I used above because it was actual gold, and Danielle Bainbridge explains it better than I can and without K-pop catching strays.
Often when people argue against the existence of cultural appropriation, the basis of the argument is centered on culture's shared nature, since something that is shared isn't owned by one particular person. But there's a weakness in this argument of ownership that stems from the way we think about possession. Some forms of ownership are rather straightforward and therefore easier to understand. If you go out and purchase a car, you have sole ownership of the car and are entitled to all of its benefits, like faster and more convenient transportation, in addition addition to all of its drawbacks, like pesky car repairs. But ownership of culture doesn't operate that way because it belongs to a group that the culture stems from and not one discrete person or persons. And as Professor Susan Scafidi notes in her book, Who Owns Culture, there are legal challenges when thinking of discrete ownership in relationship to cultural products. Legal protections like copyright or trademarking rely on a stable cultural product with a set number of creators, like a song with a fixed list of songwriters. But culture is constantly evolving and changing. So Scafidi warns that patenting an idea that is shared among a group may provoke ossification of a culture and its artifacts. But despite the difficulty of codifying cultural ownership in legal terms, there are ways that culture can be appropriated or misused once it's divorced from its original context. People who are against believing that cultural appropriation even exists often say that America is a melting pot of various cultures, and therefore no one should be allowed to lay ownership to any particular form of expression. As Scafidi also notes, indeed, the tension-filled history of American immigration and even internal migration indicates that the cultural products of others are often easier to accept and assimilate than the individuals or huddled masses themselves. And that's because people's admiration for the cultural products they consume, like art, music, literature, and fashion, can exist quite separately from the real-world treatment of the people whose culture they're appropriating from. Because at the heart of cultural appropriation isn't just a cultural object, but power. Appropriation happens when you have a position of power or are a member of a dominant culture who's able to take the parts of a marginalized culture that you enjoy, divorce them from their original meaning, and use them for entertainment value without considering their original context or having to deal with the negative ramifications that someone from that culture would have to deal with as a result of that same action. So while it may seem benign to the person who's extracting and enjoying the culture, the resulting damage can have real-world implications for the people whose culture has been misrepresented or misused.
So here's the grand idea to tie this all together. I love the heritage months. I love Black History Month in February, Asian American and Pacific Islander Month in May, Pride Month in June, Hispanic Heritage Month in September, and Indigenous Appreciation Month in November. But I try to remain open to new experiences every day. It's pretty wild to me, even if not surprising, that these celebrations are actively being erased and our collective histories are being rewritten in real time. I think we all share a responsibility to appreciate and celebrate culture, to protect and preserve them for future generations. This is how we connect with each other as a larger community. Cultural appreciation is rooted in listening, learning, honoring origins, and recognizing power. It encourages us to engage with humility and treats culture as something alive and meaningful instead of something that's used for profit and consumption. We can and should celebrate our distinct histories without fear. We can learn across differences without erasing it, and we can protect the cultural expressions that have made us who we are as a community. So celebrate Black History Month. Read Black authors, go to museums, go to festivals, try new foods, buy art from vendors. Watch Black movies, dance to good music, learn a new language, immerse yourself in what truly made this country great, the people. Celebrate the people. Thanks for listening to the 22nd episode of Solarpunking, and thanks for sticking with me all throughout winter, and welcome to our new friends. If you've enjoyed listening in so far, consider sharing this podcast with your friends and family members that you think would also like to join the movement. Also, consider leaving me a comment to let me know what you liked and didn't like. If you have excess funds, consider donating to the National Trust for Historic Preservation. The National Trust for Historic Preservation is a private nonprofit organization leading the movement to save places where our history happened. Learn more about their work at savingplaces.org. Until next week, stay hydrated and motivated. Peace.